Thanks everybody for having me. This is a new rig for me. I haven't worn this since I was doing Coachella about 4 years ago, back in my pop star craze. So anyhow, I'll have to get used to it. Actually, it feels like a kind of the headgear from a really bad orthodontia. So, all right. So step one is the Texas Center. Who in the heck is this? What is this? What's this all about? There is a website that if you have your phones with you, and I know you do because there are adult pacifiers, you can pull it out and just punch in the texascenter.org. I mean, you can do it right now while I'm watching you. Man, y'all are absolutely unlike an undergraduate class where I have to tell you to put the phones away. I'm inviting you to hit that website, bookmark it, and you can see what it's all about. You can also join our newsletter there, but it gives you a lot of insights into what we're doing at the Texas Center. And it is, we're engaged in a lot of different things, and it's important for you to be able to get your arms wrapped around it. We do everything from the video series, and I'm going to show you some excerpts from that. But we also publish books. We launch field trips all over the world. I tell people that we take travelers to where Texans made history or history made Texans. Because everybody came from someplace else. So it may be a trip to Point de Hope to see where Earl Rudder climbed the cliffs on D-Day, or it may be to Spain to figure out where the people that came and helped create New Spain in the province of Tejas. So where Texans made history and history made Texans is part of it as well. So it's a very comprehensive approach to telling the Texas story. And that's what you'll find on that website. So here's an intro video that'll give you kind of a sampler of what we're doing. This was the first video that we produced.
It's been said that Texas is a state of mind. We at the Texas Center agree. It might even be an attitude. After all, the history of Texas is an epic with a cast of millions. Over thousands of years, Texans have carved a distinctive culture out of the incredibly diverse and often very hostile geography. As a result, Texas is a bold expression of the American experience, perhaps even among the finest examples of the American ideal. That's why the mission of the Texas Center at Schreiner University is to support and encourage cultural sustainability. Texas is changing. By 2050, there will be nearly twice as many people living in the Lone Star State. What kind of Texas will they be living in? Well, we like Texas as it is now. From hats to boots, from the Lone Stars to button-down shirts, we are a mix of remembering the Alamo and watching a rodeo, all thrown in with a touch of tuxedo and the sparkle of high tech. We'd like to keep it that way. At the Texas Center, we teach newcomers the history and culture they are inheriting, the incredible story they have chosen to become a part of, and the epic ballad, or corrido if you'd prefer, to which they are adding their own verses. Of course, Texans are a people of contrast and variety, but we are united by a shared identity. Life in Texas takes grit, resourcefulness, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. That is nothing new. Texas has always been an intersection of people, cultures, and ideas, and populated by newcomers. As a result, it has become an exceptionally diverse state with a history of redeeming, restoring, and transforming ordinary individuals into people who achieve the extraordinary. At the Texas Center, we study, teach, explore, explain, and celebrate those differences. While embracing the latest technologies and with an eye fixed firmly on the future, we have created a place where the past can breathe. The future of Texas is bright, and the history of Texas has been one of self-reliance and determination. This is the hope and the aim of the Texas Center, to teach all 30 million of us what has been and what is to come, so that they can find their place in this story.
All right. So when I got hired in to start the Texas Center back in 2020, I was coming on campus as everybody else was leaving because it was COVID. So I had plenty of time to think about exactly what a Texas Center is. You know, Schreiner University just came to this aha moment one day that somebody in this state, some university in this state, needs to tell the Texas positive story. Something that is a unifying story that talks about what a remarkable expression of the human experience Texas really is. And they looked around and they really didn't think anybody else in the state was doing that. There was a lot of them tearing it down right and left. And Schreiner said, fine, we'll do it. You know, Texas is about to be the most important state in the union, population-wise, economy-wise, you name it. All the markers you can think of. Adding 1,000 people a day, every day. And so Schreiner said, all right, let's do this. How do we do it? So I happened to be talking to the provost, and he says, have you seen our, and this is when I'm working for a different university, he says, have you seen our strategic plan? And I said, tell me about it. He said, well, we were wanting to be uniquely Texan. And I said, well, how are y'all going to do that? He said, well, that's kind of why I had you make this meeting with me. And I said, oh, I can solve that issue on y'all's strategic plan by Thursday. Just give me a shot at it. So when I got down to Kerrville, then I all of a sudden had to figure out how to deliver on that promise. And during COVID, one of the things that I decided we would do is start building out curriculum, but we would build out curriculum for private schools. Because trying to get curriculum into public schools, as you know, is the world's largest pachinko machine. And so I said, you know, private schools can make their own decision, and guess what? It's free market. If your product is good, they buy it. If your product is not good, they don't buy it. And I like that sort of thing. I like that approach. So I thought, who has a string of private schools that I can approach that might be sympathetic to this messaging? And I arrived at the Barney Charter Schools that were sponsored by Hillsdale College out of Michigan. Now, how many of y'all have heard of Hillsdale? Of course you have, because you're on their mailing list, and you're getting imprimis, and their mailing list is 6 million names long. And Hillsdale's biggest donor group is out of Texas, followed by California. So I'm thinking that Hillsdale must be some sort of really big deal because it casts such a large shadow. And Larry Arnn is brilliant as the president of that school. So I said, all right, who develops your, or who does your Texas history curriculum in your charter schools? And their answer was, we don't teach Texas in Texas. And I said, well, why? I said, well, we're all about founding principles and blah-de-blah-de-blah. And I said, well, what do you think Texas is? You know, I had to remind them that Texas is part of the United States. And so after I made the pitch, they invited me to go up to Hillsdale, Michigan, and have that conversation face-to-face and shoot a little 30-minute video making my point. So when I went up there, Hillsdale is a small town in the middle of rolling hills surrounded with cornfields. The school is smaller than Schreiner, population-wise, acreage-wise. I was amazed that I was looking at, you know, kind of a little D3 school in the middle of the cornfield. But here's where they were different. Largest building on campus was a big media center. And they publish in premise, and they do videos, and they do all sorts of media and push that out. And that's why Hillsdale had a much larger shadow than I thought their weight and heft would warrant. They were really good at that media biz. So I said, well, my gosh, I bet we could do that in Texas. So I came down. First person I hired was a guy out of KXAN in Austin named Ben Freeberg. And Ben Freeberg is multi-generation Texas descendant and knows how to tell a nice, tight story. And I said, Ben, we need to tell the whole story of Texas, 5 minutes at a time. And he lost all the color in his face. Now, that video that you just saw was the first one he produced for me. And actually, the first assignment I gave him was, I said, Ben, we need something that the university can get their teeth into and understand what we're about to do. Because they didn't know what a Texas Center was either. Nobody did. We were busy defining it. But when he produced that video, one day, it's just, I'm in my office and Ben is in his, and there's about 50 feet between us, and we hear the front door open, and here comes the footprints, gong, 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 and it's the president and the provost. You know, when those two guys show up in the same spot at any given time, it's either really good news or really bad news. And they pointed at Ben and said, come into Frazier's office. Now, it had taken me a year to get Ben hired. Let's start with that. And that's the first thing he produced. The president said, that video was the best thing that we have ever produced at Schreiner University. Well done. And gave Ben a hug. So I immediately went to the Title IX part of my, faculty handbook. I don't think you can touch each other. I think that's... But then the provost pointed to me and said, you were right, I was wrong. This is the way we need to go. And it's not often a provost admits that. So we built out that 250 video series. It's about a $2.5 million project. And it was funded by donors from Abilene that followed me down from Abilene to Kerrville, and also some funders in Fort Worth. So it's an I-20 product. So this is just one of the excerpts that will come into play here shortly. Texas became a nation, perhaps even a distinct ethnicity, in the 1930s. The creation of a national identity is an interesting process. When did early colonists in Massachusetts stop thinking of themselves as British and become Americans? When did Mexicans identify themselves as La Raza Cosmica, a new nation among all those already on Earth? Where do nationality, race, culture, and ethnicity intersect? All of these are the building blocks of a national identity.
Ethnicity is a social construct built upon a shared culture, language, religion, customs, belief, and traditions. The Texas Centennial Exposition had energized this process, leaving many residents to make a distinction between themselves and other Americans. Texans were evolving. There were other reasons. Texas history became a required subject in Texas schools in 1891. Lawmakers in Austin began a tradition of naming unique aspects of Texas as official. The bluebonnet became the official flower in 1901. The pecan tree got the nod in 1919. The mockingbird took its place in 1927. It could sing a new tune, too. In 1929, Texas Our Texas, written by William J. Marsh and Gladys Yoakum Wright, became the state song.
Texas, our Texas, oh hail.
Laws regulating the state flag, including the size and orientation of its star, became official in 1933.
Texas, your freeborn single star.
Film helped too. The 1915 Martyrs of the Alamo, or The Birth of Texas, told the story of the Texas Revolution in cinema. There was also a growing body of works on Texas history. E.G. Littlejohn's Texas History Stories popularized many tales of the early days of the state. From 1926 to 1928, the Dallas Morning News ran a comic strip entitled Texas History Movies that was later published as a book. The Magnolia Petroleum Company also produced an edition, and together these works flooded Texas schools. Students across the state learned an easy-to-digest and popular version of the Texas story. Organizations like the Texas State Historical Association also published the Southwestern Historical Quarterly and supplied a steady infusion of state history. Texans began to think of themselves as exceptional. Their defiance of national trends at the time reinforced this belief. Governor James Allred and Senator Tom Connally believed the New Deal had become too large of an intervention in the national economy. When President Franklin Roosevelt attempted to increase the number of Supreme Court justices, what was called court packing at the time, many Texas politicians grew alarmed at this bold attempt at extending presidential power, and they made a Texas-sized fuss about it. For some Texans, Washington was getting too pushy. Businessmen across Texas agreed and grew angry at all the new regulations. Some farmers did not approve of the takeover of agriculture by the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Conservative groups like the American Liberty League and the Texas Regulars believed President Roosevelt was pushing socialism, perhaps even communism, on America. Texans, equipped with a sense of their own identity, defied national trends when it suited them. At other times, they could be very mainstream. One thing was for sure: Texans had discovered swagger. So the 250 videos are not just about content. It's also about the ideas of Texas. So why get involved in cultural sustainability? Primarily because if we're bringing in 1,000 people a day from someplace else, they didn't have Coach Pringle for 7th grade Texas history. I mean, I don't know who y'all's 7th grade Texas history teacher was, but chances are first name was Coach, so at least you're halfway home. But if you're moving in from Oregon, you don't even have a basis for understanding the Texas story. I was pulled aside by some techies in Austin, and they said, "My goodness, we love Texas."
We liked its emphasis on things like freedom and faith and family and stuff like that that we were kind of scowled upon when we were in California. So we love all that about Texas. We feel free here. We just don't understand it. We don't get it. What is the magic, the secret sauce? What is it? So we wish that you would do something for us, Don. First thing we wish you would do is start a school of elocution so that they can all sound like you. And I said, oh, no, nobody wants that. And then the second thing we wish you would do is create a newcomer's guide to Texas. So people are eager to join the Texas story, but somebody's got to tell them. In essence, we have to recapture the plot line. We have to build the narrative back. So we built it back across 250 videos, and you can sit down and binge watch them, and you'll be done in 20 hours. You've already got that much time invested in Landman, and don't lie. So if you can watch Landman, you can certainly watch this. All right. As we were building that out, we came to the attention of folks in state government, in particular the TEA. So in 2022, I was asked to help shape the overhaul of what the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills would look like. We had not updated the standards by that point in 20 years. And the test scores have been going, And Texas history has been eroded in 7th grade. My girls, I've got a 30-year-old and a 26-year-old. One's in Chicago, one's in Austin. And both of them only had one semester of the year-long Texas history course in 7th grade because the superintendent said, hey, we need to teach Microsoft Office. Which class can we slide that into? Which class doesn't really matter? It was Texas. It was cannibalized right there. Well, neither did they have a Texas history teacher that had any hours of Texas history or any history. One was a chemistry teacher that was getting ready for retirement. I think the other one had been a Baptist youth minister before a change of career. I'm not sure what that was about, but he ended up teaching my youngest daughter. And that was it. There's your Texas expertise in Abilene, Texas. And I'm looking at that, and I wish that there was some piece of law, some area of law called educational malpractice, because that's kind of what I felt like as a parent. So when I was asked to come in with the SBOE and be a content advisor in 2022, I saw that as my patriotic chore. I did not have any sort of ambition of being involved in the state sausage grinding process. When I got into the room, there was 9 of us, content advisors. They said, well, let's all introduce ourselves and you tell us what we ought to do with the current standards. First 5 they asked, they said we should do away with Texas history entirely, because there's not enough time in the school year to deliver the vital stuff. Then they went around the room, and then they got to me. And I said, what do you think we ought to do, Frazier? And I said, I think we ought to put a little bit of Texas in every grade level and integrate it so that you can extract it. You don't silo it in 4th and 7th grade. It ends up becoming contextualized throughout the story. So when you're talking about the Napoleonic Wars, guess what? There's connections to New Spain, which then play out in Texas. And there's artifacts from those events in this museum. So why don't we do stuff like that instead of doing this silo versus that silo? I mean, the way it was written, even in U.S. history, we wanted kids to have the first half of U.S. history in 8th grade, and then the second half 3 hormone-filled years later in 11th grade. Do you think they're paying any attention? Heavens no, they are not. Guess what was tested? 8th grade. What's not tested was 7th grade Texas history. So that's where you threw the cast-offs. That's where you cannibalized your time back. So I said, if we just integrate it and contextualize it, history then becomes a story. And stories are what we remember. Otherwise, it's what every kid laments. Facts and dates and names and yuck. But if there's a story connected to those facts and names and dates, then it sticks. Guess what? 2022, that approach was kind of modified. I was willing to sacrifice 7th grade Texas history entirely if we could integrate the whole thing. Well, guess who came after me with their chompers? The Daughters of the Republic of Texas. You're doing away with Texas history. No, I'm actually really integrating it. I got a red alert issued on me. So between that and then opposition from all sorts of forces, the entire process in 2022 failed. SBOE could not come up with new standards. So I went back to Kerrville and I finished out E Pluribus Texas, and I was going to sell that to the non-public school audience. Because 1 in 5 students in Texas doesn't go to public school. So I said, that's still a large enough market to justify this process. So that's what started that video series. But then there was a new SBOE convened, and they said, there's some ideas that were floated last time that maybe we can revisit. So I got involved with advising, this is the approach I'm taking. Y'all can take it or leave it. Doesn't matter to me. But the Texas Center is absolutely foursquare going to do this. And next thing you know, I'm asked to be a content advisor again. And this time, that's the framework. And that's the framework that passed, and that's the framework that will be voted on in just a few weeks in Austin. So if you take a look at that, you see how it's layered. Now, in many ways, this was an Iron Chef challenge for me, essentially given a cardboard box full of ingredients and told to make a great meal out of it. And because these different date ranges were provided by SBOE members, none of whom were historians or teachers in the social studies. So we were having to go around and kind of shoehorn in what we could in each of these things. But ultimately what we did is we made grade 6 and grade 8 very Texas heavy. So that kept that desire of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas intact, and it allowed us to turn that 8th grade Texas history course into a true capstone course that contextualizes the entire human experience through a Texas lens. Now, it's been criticized. This is way too Texas-centric. And I have to remind the critics that this is the Texas State Board of Education. It's not the Delaware State Board of Education. Your U.S. history is taught from Boston looking southwest. Your textbooks are written that way. But if Texas is taking the lead, well, maybe we ought to take a few opportunities to look at the entire sweep of the American experience, certainly from the southwest looking northeast. It's not wrong material, it's just a different emphasis on a different syllable. Okay? So now all of a sudden 8th grade really becomes something that you can't dodge. That becomes tested. So what does this look like in real practical terms? I mean, there's some educators in the room here going, how am I going to do that? I'm a 3rd grade teacher, and we're going to be talking about ancient Egypt. Okay, how do you connect ancient Egypt to Texas? Well, there were people in Texas at the same time as there were people in Egypt. Think about how it's taught now. The way it's taught now is that Egypt is where the people are. And then a few years later, those people end up coming to America, and Shazam, there's people here. Who knew? Well, now your students will know that. So what's going on at the same time that we're wrapping mummies over in Egypt? Well, there's some dude napping flint on the shores of a creek that runs into a river. And it's those worked lithics that the kid found in the school play yard and brought the teacher and said, "What is this?" He says, "Well, what you're holding there is this kind of point, and that was being made about 5,000 years ago. At about the same time they're building this first pyramid in Egypt that we just had in class." Then all of a sudden that kid understands that she is part of a larger continuum, instead of it being fairy tales. Here's an example. Give me the year, place, and context of the story of Hansel and Gretel. Got no idea. You know there's some gingerbread involved, and apparently a cannibalistic witch. But how it fits into the larger story, we don't know if that's medieval Germany. Hansel and Gretel might be a clue, but maybe they're Dutch. They could be Danish. Or they just could have been Coloradans. Who knows? So, in order to keep our history from being Hansel and Gretelized, we got to show kind of where it all goes, and it becomes that narrative flow, and we spiral it from grade to grade. And so all of a sudden grade 3 prepares you for what you're going to pick up in grade 4, et cetera, until you have that capstone experience. So that is the framework that was actually an echo of what was recommended in 2022, that then became somewhat operationalized in E Pluribus Texas, that then inspired the state agencies to come to me and ask them how they could pull that off. So there's the relationship. And all of this is public record. Pay no attention to what you might read in the newspaper. You can go online to the State Board of Education and you can see everything I have ever said on this topic all laid out, because it's part of the public record. So, there's nothing nefarious here. Okay, so this is kind of the mechanics of it. 9 content advisors, including me, interpreting what the standards will look like. That's what we're in the process of. We're now into the second reading. Do y'all know where curriculum comes from? A lot of people don't. Do y'all know who your State Board of Education representative is? Okay, there's one. I have taken this show on the road all over the state, and everybody's going, "What's the State Board of Education?" Well, ladies and gentlemen, Texas culture gets made in Texas classrooms. Let that percolate in. And what gets taught in Texas classrooms comes from the State Board of Education. That's where the policy is born. And then the TEA implements that policy. So we're in the process of coming up and crafting policy right now. I'll be back at the sausage factory in a couple of weeks. All right. So 9 content advisors that are all coming up with what these new standards will look like. If they pass, and I have every reason to think that they will, if they pass, it'll roll out in 2030. So why the lag? Well, because every teacher in Texas will need to be retrained. If you've been using the same PowerPoint for 4th grade since you graduated from Texas State University, you're going to have to redo it because you're not teaching the same content anymore. 7th grade teachers can roll up to 8th grade. But they're going to have to be the best 7th grade teachers. It can't be Coach Pringle. And poor old Coach Pringle, he did his best for me, but just was inadequate. All right. So every teacher in Texas will have to be retrained. Well, that includes college faculty members. Because where do teachers come from? From our universities. And the universities have schools of ed that train your teachers. And now all of a sudden, those professors with their yellow dog-eared sheets of paper will have to rethink about how they're going to do it. And since a bunch of these people are not from Texas, this will force them to eat their own liver. They'll be going, I cannot believe we're putting all this emphasis on Texas. We don't do this in Wisconsin. I get it, but this is a curriculum. These are standards for Texas kids in a Texas classroom sitting in a Texas desk looking out a Texas window at Texas. So it ought to mean something to them. Otherwise, what's the point? All right. So places like this museum, the Texas Center, the Alamo, Education Service Centers, you name it, everybody's going to be involved in this. There's going to be a big, big effort to retrain everybody. I'm assured that this big lift is funded. I was talking to one of the other content advisors, and she said, we've been planning on this for 20 years. So we've got the money. We're just waiting for the SBOE to catch up with us because we're ready to retrain. We've been ready to retrain. We just couldn't get new standards passed. Well, they're about to get new standards passed. Lots of resources out there, though, so I'm not too worried about that. So it's a monumental and significant change, massive overhaul, all the way down to textbooks had to be rewritten. Think about that. In the old days, you could write an American history textbook and do some different colored pages about Texas. And that'll now have to go all the way across that curriculum. That's a big lift for McGraw-Hill. But guess what? That textbook contract is pretty lucrative, so they can just suck eggs. And of course, there will probably be a bluebonnet curriculum that comes out too. All right, so here's kind of the parting shot on the E Pluribus Texas video. This is actually the last one in the series, so you'll know how it turns out. But it gives you an idea of why we're doing this. In 2036, Texas will mark 200 years since it declared its independence from Mexico. Back in 1936, at the Texas Centennial Exposition, the state threw a big party and boasted of its history, progress, and future. In short, Texans crafted and told their story to the world. Yet, what story will Texas tell in 2036? Not everyone in the state agrees on what exactly the Texas story is. In 2024, the Texas State Historical Association, founded as the keeper and perpetuator of the state's history, emerged from months of turmoil over how the history of Texas should be presented. One faction, heavily populated by university professors, claimed the title of progressive historians and urged keen investigation of the excesses of Texans in the past and, in some ways, demanded atonement for those days gone by from current and future generations. Facing opposition from other thinkers, funders, and non-academic Texas enthusiasts, the disgruntled professors led a secession movement to continue their efforts at recrafting the Lone Star story and formed a rival Texas History Association. Few outside of professional history circles seem to notice, but the outcomes of this contest might decide how the Texas story gets told and what gets told. Clearly, the story of Texas matters. In 2022, Republican lawmaker Tan Parker of Flower Mound spearheaded legislation to create the 1836 Project. Led by a 9-person committee of appointed advisors, the effort aims to make sure that the story of Texas continues to be told well into the future, from classrooms to historic sites across the state. At the same time, officials secured public funds to help overhaul historic sites related to the Texas Revolution. These include the Alamo, San Jacinto, La Bahia, San Felipe de Austin, and Washington on the Brazos. Other Texans across the state seem less concerned about the past and more inclined to ponder what lies ahead. One forward-looking organization, Texas 2036, is a leader in this effort and seeks to ensure Texas is the best place to live and work, especially by addressing the biggest challenges facing our state as our population and economy continue to grow. By 2050, experts predict that Texas will have the largest population and largest economy of any state in the nation. This transformation will bring with it a huge amount of national and international influence. It will also bring many growing pains. Decision makers agree that issues to address include an aging population, underperforming public schools, the need to create an adequately trained workforce, affordable and accessible health care, careful management of state infrastructure and natural resources, issues facing the criminal justice system and foster care, and making the state government run more efficiently. There is a lot to think about. But all that lies ahead. In E Pluribus Texas, we've endeavored to tell the Texas story from the beginning of time to present, as completely as possible. Some parts are great, inspiring, and even heroic. Other parts are, well, less so. Yet all these parts make us who we are, Texans. Now, it's your turn. What is your story? And where do you fit in the big, bold, and remarkable story of Texas? We all look forward to that answer. So now you've got something to look forward to. When you go online, you can hit the E Pluribus Texas YouTube channel. I mean, we've got a Texas Center YouTube channel, and all of these are free. Every bit of it's free. So if you're in New Delhi, or in Chicago, or if you're in Corpus Christi, same price. And you can watch them 5 minutes at a time until you get the whole Texas story. Now, this shouldn't be the only Texas story. This is just the beginning that gives you the framework. All right, what questions do y'all have for me?